Good day, everybody. Zack here with RevZilla, and welcome to another episode of Daily Rider, where we learn about motorcycles as we ride. Our special guest on this episode is Yamaha's MT-03. So that is a 300 class parallel twin, a very low seat height, and a price of $4,600. I think we might have a pretty good daily rider on our hands here. As usual though, there's only one way to be sure. So let's go for a ride. All right, here we go. Ready to go with the MT-03, and we can take a closer look at some of the componentry. Upside down fork, which I suppose is a nice feature, but other than that, it's a pretty basic machine, right? We're not exactly in the upper echelon of price, so it's just a 2-piston sliding pin caliper, I think, and a 298 millimeter rotor, which is the same size as the MT-09 rotor. Presumably it's the same part number at Yamaha, except the MT-09's got 2 of them. And this sort of squinted up little face here. I like that it's kind of spare, you know. It's a naked bike. It's supposed to be thin on bodywork, but there really isn't a lot of plastic here. So it makes the horn kind of prominent, for one. And a pretty small radiator. Remember the Street Fighter had that huge radiator? Because 200 horsepower. So 5 times less horsepower, 5 times smaller radiator. Makes sense. 321cc parallel twin. 180 crank, so the pistons go up and down opposite each other. Pretty standard firing order. Yeah, steel frame, pretty basic stuff. Some stamped steel, lever pedal, stuff like that. Some of the stuff's kind of budget, but you know, it's an affordable machine, so I can't blame them for that, I don't think. So let's fire it up. There we go. Pitter patter, pitter patter. That sounds like a willing little engine. Yeah, and notice this very low seat. Big scoop to the seat here, so we'll talk about that also. But all right, I'm cooking in the sun. Let's hit the road. First red light, maybe about 100 yards. We're 1 for 1. There isn't even anybody waiting at the intersection. Jesus. Alright, off we go on the MT-03. We can talk about some specs. The numbers are small for the MT-03. Like I said, 321cc engine, makes about 40 horsepower, or about 5 times less than a Street Fighter V4. And yeah, 375 pounds approximately, which is quite light for a full-size street bike basically. It holds 3.7 gallons of fuel. Hey-o. Merging. So yeah, small numbers, small bike, makes sense. The same 3.7 gallons of fuel it holds as an MT-09, you might be thinking. We'll talk about range and that kind of thing later. This guy moved out of the way for me. That was nice of him. Thank you, sir. And the last number we should discuss is seat height, which is 30.7 inches, 30.7 inches, which is pretty low seat height for any motorcycle, aside from a cruiser, that is. But to put it into context a little bit, a Honda Grom seat height is about 30 inches. I think it's 30 on the nose, actually, if memory serves. So yeah, the seat height on the MT-03 is less than an inch higher than it is on a Honda Grom. So it's a small motorcycle, but that's the whole point. It's pretty good. In general, the ergonomics on MT-03 are quite good. I'm 6'2", and so the seat to foot peg distance is a little bit tight. It's just a low seat height in general, as we talked about. So it's very, very easy for me to flat foot at a stop sign or a stoplight, which is a plus. Over 6 feet tall, and you'd probably want a little bit thicker seat just to raise you up a little bit, give you a little bit more leg room, and sort of open up the ergos a little bit. But in general, it's just a really comfortable, pleasant place to sit. The seat's pretty comfortable, and foot pegs are grippy. Nice flat handlebar, puts you in a kind of a commanding position. It's a nice place to be. Ramp closed? But that's my ramp. How am I supposed to go where I'm supposed to go? Well, heck, that's gonna be a problem. How do I do this otherwise? Turn left or something? I'm gambling. Going through this neighborhood. I don't have any idea where I'm going, but Essentially the right direction. Hopefully we see another on-ramp or something. Can't get there that way. How do I get to the freeway? I don't want to just look at my phone. It's like cheating, you know? Like, where's the sense of adventure? Spring Street's got a real promising feel to it. I feel like maybe there's an on-ramp on Spring Street. You go ahead. No. No, it doesn't look like there's one there. I would talk about what the bike's like to ride through a neighborhood, but that's supposed to happen later. And then what would I talk about in the other neighborhood? Like whether or not I like the houses, I guess? I don't know. Okay, this is a nice big street. This looks very promising. I see freeway signs. We're gonna make it happen, team. Wrap. 710 south. I don't usually take this ramp. Oh, it looks pretty fun though. Got some corners here. Yeah. 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 All the way up to merging speed already. Good job, little buddy. No phone needed. I'm proud of us. Now that we're out onto the freeway like this, we can dispel the first myth that is often perpetrated. Now that we're out onto the freeway, we can dispel the first myth about these bikes people often spout, which is that 300 bikes can't keep up on the freeway. Well, the little MT-03 is showing that that's just not true. 75 miles an hour, 8,000 RPM, 6th gear, no big deal. Plugging right along. I can slow down to maybe 60 miles an hour here in top gear and then give you a wide open roll on. There we go, wide open, 65, 68, 70, 72, 75, 78. You go 80 miles an hour eventually, you know. Someone on the social media asked to do a top speed run, but I'm not going to do that. So I think that goes to show that the performance is good enough, you know, to skip down the freeway if I'm not willing to hold it wide open until it stops accelerating. But yeah, plenty of performance for a freeway, I say. So while we're still on the freeway, sort of not really freeway, but basically, we can talk about range a little bit. I mentioned that this bike holds the same 3.7 gallons as the MT-09 and gets better mileage than MT-09, predictably. I got mid-50s, something like that. 53 miles to the gallon, I think was my last calculated tank. So 3.7 gallons times, yeah, 3.7 times 53. I'm really not very good at math, but that's like 190 something, maybe? Boy, I hope that's right. The point is, you can go pretty far, conceivably. So yeah, I mean, you know, better part, you can go 150, 160 miles probably on a tank. That's usually when the fuel light's been coming on for me, 145 miles, so not bad. And just in general, it's a fairly pleasant place to sit on an MT-03. Like I said, the seat's pretty comfortable. One thing about the seat is it pitches forward a little bit toward the tank, so I find myself sitting way up with my nuts on the tank a little bit more than I probably would normally. Especially on the freeway, I like to slide back a little bit. When you slide back, you kind of raise your torso up, which makes the aerodynamics just slightly worse. But yeah, in general, not such a bad spot to be, and it would just crush long distance trips if you wanted to do that. We got to talk about mirrors too, obviously. Those are about to get passed by this luxury car, but I can see it coming up. I can even tell what brand it is in the rearview mirror. It's an Audi. So standard issue Yamaha mirrors doing pretty well, actually. And the engine is a little bit buzzy on this bike as a base of its character, but practically it's not so bad. I get a little bit of vibration in the foot pegs and in the handlebar, especially at 7,000 or 8,000 RPM. I wish you could cruise down the freeway at 5,000 RPM, but you know, you gotta have a bigger engine for that, so I get it. But yeah, the mirrors are surprisingly smooth and they're placed pretty well. Wouldn't mind if they were a little bit higher, but in general, just good ergonomics on the MT-03, well thought out and not super surprising from a company like Yamaha, frankly. Oh yeah, one stop sign cleaned. Not that surprising that the MT-03 is pretty well balanced. It's very small, so it's easy to control with your body weight, and the center of gravity is pretty low, right? The seat's low, and it's just a pretty petite motorcycle in general. Yeah, so I don't have a lot of complaints about its manners. It's a very basic setup, and yeah, works pretty up. Okay, well, I had to put my foot down that time. That's on me though, that's on me. And yeah, in general, city manners are quite good. Clutch is predictable, not anything special, which sometimes is good. Sometimes when clutches get complicated, they get a little bit complicated to use, but this one is not the case. It's nice. The gearing is quite low. I'm going to leave this stop sign in second gear. As you can see, even in second gear, it's pretty polite, which means, yes, exactly, I would gear this bike up as I would gear so many machines up. But it makes sense. It's a bike intended for new and returning riders, and so, you know, less likely to have tall gearing because it makes it a little bit harder to ride. Fueling is pretty good, I think, especially if you lug the engine just a little bit, which is what I typically do with bikes. So I'm going 30 miles an hour in fourth gear, and here I find the throttle response pretty good. Always a little bit of a hitch in on-off throttle, especially with more affordable machines. That's the case because there's just a little bit more lash in the drive line and everything. But in general, it's predictable, it's easy to use. If you were to ride at 30 miles an hour in second gear at, say, 7,000 RPM, something like that, then the on-off throttle is definitely a little bit harder to control. And I oftentimes see newer riders riding at higher RPMs because they feel like that's where the bike is on the freeway, that's where it might be happiest or make the most sense for the engine to be used. But in general, if there's enough torque thrust to move you along, then that's usually where I keep the engine where it's smoothest. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about passenger accommodations on the old MT-03 because I doubt there'll be a lot of cross-country trips with two people on one of these bikes. But in general, it's not bad. It's there's a decent amount of legroom considering it's a sporty little bike. It's okay. The seat is pretty wide, but it's just not very soft. It's kind of thin, so there's not a ton of padding back there. The other one concern is that the seat is very low. The rider seat's very scooped out, like sort of behind the tank and in front of the passenger seat, so that makes the deck where the passenger sits raised up a little bit. So a passenger's going to sit up quite a bit higher than the rider is, which can be a good thing, but something to consider. The MT-03 is a lovely little bike to take down a twisty road, for the same reason that it's good around town and decent on the highway. It's just a ergonomically pleasant place to sit, and it's sporty, you know. It reacts nicely to a little bit of body English if you want to lean off. If you were going to go to your first track day or your fifth or sixth track day, I would definitely recommend this bike. It would be super fun. Tires good, chassis good, brakes would probably fade a little bit once you really started leaning on them, but in general it's just such a fun little bike, and it's playful, and the balance is nice, it's communicative, it's planted, it's all the things you want from a motorcycle. And again, considering coming from Yamaha, one of the more prominent motorcycle makers in the world, no real surprise that they have this one figured out. This speed right here on surface streets is really, I feel like, the sweet spot for MT-03. All the bikes in this category, really. This is, to me, where they seem the happiest. 50, 55, 60 miles an hour, something like that. Maybe it's a pleasant speed for all motorcycles, I don't know. Not some of them. Some of them want to go real fast. Not this one. It likes just trotting along at reasonable speed. We got a red light. See if we can back it in. A little bit. Not super advanced equipment on this bike. It has ABS, which is a feature I am, of course, very fond of. Not switchable, so you got to fan the clutch to get it to back in, and it doesn't have a slipper either, as far as I can tell. So, or if it has a slipper, it doesn't work very well. So yeah, it's not maybe the best bike for backing in, but you know, doable. We learned. So we talk about the dash while we're here, right? Might as well. Same dash from the MT-10, I believed. So named for its constantly empty tank. And the MT-03 has put this dash to good use. I think it's a nice layout for a bike like this. You got speed real prominent here, gear position indicator real prominent, fuel gauge, clock, and this bar tack that goes across the top there. Yeah, it's a nice setup. It's clean, it's easy to understand, and yeah, not much else to say about that, I suppose. So one thing that's definitely worth talking about with regard to the MT-03 is all the other bikes in the category. I got a wave from the badass Harley dude there. It's not bad. He knows I'm on a Street Fighter. That's why. So you got your KTM 390 Duke, and that's sort of the upper echelon of the class in my opinion, because it makes the most horsepower. It's got some kind of fancier componentry. As we come up to this red light, we can test the brakes on the MT-03, which are pretty sharp, pretty good. But again, that 298 millimeter rotor up there. The 390 Duke has a 320 millimeter rotor, quite a bit bigger. Plus the 390 Duke's got the TFT dash, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's kind of the fancy Euro model, right, in this category. It's also 5,500 bucks, and this bike is 4,600 bucks. So that's not nothing when you're talking in this price point. What else is there? Z400, of course, which I believe is $5,000, if memory serves. So again, a little bit more expensive than this. Basically the same. The styling's not quite as polarizing on the Z400, and the ergos are maybe slightly different, but it's largely the same bike, if we're honest. You do get a little more punch out of the Kawasaki engine, so that's something to consider for sure. And then you got your CB300R, the Honda single-cylinder Honda there, which is arguably the best looking of all of the small naked bikes. It's I don't know, 390 Duke's pretty cool looking, but CB300's got that Neo Sports Cafe, that's what Honda calls it. It's got a round headlight and stuff. It's also really light. I think it's 30 pounds lighter than a CB300F, which they don't actually sell anymore, so I'm not sure why I brought that up. Actually, the reason to talk about the CB300F as in Frank is that it is cheaper than this bike. I think it's 4,300 bucks or something like that, and it's still on the Honda website, so I take that means you can find them in showrooms still. But CB300R is, I think, also $5,000, $4,950 if I'm remembering correctly. So the point is, the MT-03, aside from the sort of obsolete CB300F, which it outperforms in my opinion, is the cheapest of the bikes that I would recommend in the category. And yeah, it's I think that really says something, because all those bikes are good bikes, and aside from the KTM are yeah, I mean, the KTM being the most expensive one is never gonna, you know, get a gold star for pricing, but even 5,500 bucks for that bike's not that too bad. But yeah, anyway, MT-03 stacks up pretty well against all those other bikes, I think. And now the time has come, of course, for the most important test for any street bike, which is how does it handle when you're not on the street. So here we go. Done a little off-road testing course. Go little MT, go. App. This is pretty not bad. Small bikes got kind of softish suspension, so it's not too bad in this stuff. In this sort of like, jeez, in this sort of sandy covered dirt here, it gets a little sketchy, but again, this street tires. But yeah, if you got a ride you want to take that takes you down a dirt road, I would not be intimidated to take a MT-03. I would just watch its little underbelly and on you know, rocks and stuff, but something smooth like this, no big deal. And if you want to hit a jump, brap, no big deal. I'm going to avoid the big jump. We're gonna ride past that one, but not bad. Not bad at all, actually. I was expecting the suspension to be more harsh, but not too bad. Can we get a old wheelie out of this guy? What do we think? Oh, look at it go! Hey-oh, second gear. Third gear. No dice in third gear. Not a bad little wheelie though. Second gear wheelies. Right. Look at you go, little MT. Oh, there's copper. Hopefully they didn't see my gnarly 27-mile-an-hour wheelie on my hyper naked bike. Another question, back to comparisons really quick, that I did not address, that some people had, was how this compares to an R3, which is a great question because it's the same, they share a lot of DNA, right? Just the MT-03 has this higher handlebar, no fairing, but essentially the same bike underneath. And in general, I would definitely not recommend a sport bike instead of a naked bike. You know, if someone was between an R6 and an MT-09, for example, there's no way. I would absolutely recommend the MT-09 all day long, unless all you're doing is going to a racetrack, because the MT-09 is just more comfortable. But the R3 and actually the Ninja 400 as it compares to the Z400, those sport bikes, even though they are sport bikes, they are fairly comfortable compared to motorcycles in general, compared to their naked upright siblings. The R3 is not a particularly uncomfortable bike, so if you think the fairing's really cool, then it's a great option as well. I think I would recommend the MT-03 just from simplicity, and you save a little bit of loot, but yeah, in general, the sport bikes are pretty comfortable and a good alternative, with the exception of the RC390, which one of the reasons that the RC390 is cool is that it's a small sport bike that actually feels like a sport bike. It's much more aggressive, you know, sharper ergonomics, and it's less comfortable. So that's one where I would definitely recommend, for a street bike anyway, the Duke over the RC. But for the Japanese bikes, I don't see any reason really to get to stay away from the sport bikes. They're pleasant little machines as well. Oh, so one thing I forgot to say about the dash is that if you hold down the blinker switch and the high beam for 5 seconds, then that activates launch control, which we can experiment with when we leave this light. And then if you cycle the high beam 3 times and tap the high beam 3 times, then you've engaged the automatic launch. So I should be able to just pin it and it'll drop into gear. I'm just kidding. I'm making all this stuff up. I'm stuck at a red light. Sorry. Obviously, I'm out of interesting stuff to talk about, so it's only fitting, really, that our ride is coming to an end. Just gotta get on the freeway here. We'll be back to the neighborhood. We will answer Instagram questions, and of course, we will rank this little MT-03 on the Daily Rider leaderboard, which is gonna be fun. Like I said, pretty good little Daily Rider on our hands here. Here we go. Oh my god, small bikes are so much fun. Right, peeling off the freeway here behind a Honda Civic that is burning a lot of oil. Just about ready to answer some questiones. You can do one more back in here. Yeah, that's actually a nice smooth one. It's mean streets kind of attitude coming through there. Nice job, little MT. You can listen to the pitter patter of this of the little engine. I'm not a massive fan of the 180 crank parallel twin, but I've had a lot of people tell me, you know, like, I've got an Ninja 650 and I love the way it sounds. And I suppose it's a little bit more unique now that the other style of parallel twin, the 270 crank and alternative firing order cranks, are more popular. This is, like, you know, not as mainstream. But I don't know, I'm from the generation that I like the sound of a V12. I like the bassy thump, not so much the tinny rattle. But that's just me. Anyway, Instagram questions. Let's get to it, shall we? Clarkenstein5 asks, would my 6'4" legs fit with that gas tank? Yeah, so what Clarkenstein's asking about here is this these curves, right? So my knees sit just below here, which is fine. At 6'4", you might start running into this. So one thing you could do, because the seat is scooped so low, is get a thicker seat, stack yourself up a little bit. It'll give your knees a little bit less of a bend and hopefully move your leg away from this crease here. You'd want to go to a showroom and try it, but I think 6'4" would work on this bike. That's my instinct. Gus Trevino 22 says, call me weird, but I'm really starting to like these smaller displacement bikes. Well, that's not a question, Gus Trevino 22, but you know what? I'm just going to point it out and agree with you. These small displacement bikes are awesome. So keep on loving them, as you should. Here we go. I really hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Rackshit5666 asks, is this tiny buddy good for mile munching? Yeah, good question. So we talked about that a little bit on the freeway. I definitely think so. Pretty comfortable. You could probably get some soft luggage for it or something like that, but I mean, it will crush miles all day long. And yeah, like I said, decent range, 150 miles or so. So nothing to be afraid of if you want to take this baby on a road trip. He also says, by the way, love from India. All right. Well, love from California, right back at you, man. EGSN3 asks, MT-03 versus CB300R versus Duke 390 as a, quote, first bike for a returning rider. Thank you very much. I would ask, I guess, about what your returning rider status is, because if you're pretty confident on a motorcycle already and you don't really need the bike to be especially small, I might recommend a Z650 or an SV650 or an MT-07, something like that, because you'll have a little bit more room to grow into it. And if you're a returning rider, as it sounds like you are, then maybe you're already familiar and you don't need the bike to be so small. But to answer your question, I would go MT-03 between those three, because I think the MT-03's got a little more punch than the CB300R, but it's, I don't know, just a little bit more cheap than a Duke 390. That's honestly what I'd recommend. You save almost $1,000, so I think I'd go with this one. Sarah Michelle 007 says, hey, look, they got rid of the weird blinkers. Good call, Sarah Michelle. I'm glad I saved that comment, because yeah, that Yamaha used to just use all these freaking bloated pumpkin orange terrible floppy blinkers on all their bikes. MT-03's got it's got nice you know, little LED blinkers there. They're still kind of big, but that's not their problem. That's a DOT thing. They have to make the surface size a certain amount. But yeah, good call, Sarah Michelle. Thanks for that. BCox24 asks, does this push the Ninja 400 off the top of the mountain? No, it doesn't. I think I would still recommend a Ninja 400 as the sort of gold standard for the small bike class. The engine's got a ton of punch. It's super versatile. You could take it racing at a national level if you wanted to, or you could, you know, just ride to work on it, ride it anywhere and anywhere you want to. It's just like, it's a great little bike. It's a great value. It's awesome. And the MT-03 is a super nice little bike. Also, it doesn't really lack anything aside from the horsepower, but I would still just say the Ninja 400 is the top of the heap for me. Last question, Rawegian Denim asks, this over MT-07 for a new rider, not enough power to grow into? I think if you're tall enough and you feel confident enough, I think an MT-07 or a Z650 or an SV650 are bikes that you can start on and are totally reasonable. If you're shorter in stature or you just feel less confident, then I think a bike like this is ideal, because it really is so approachable, so easy to use, and I think it's got plenty of power. I think that some people put too much emphasis on horsepower. I mean, you saw me get on the on-ramp there. I was having a hoot. It's just fun to ride a bike, even if it doesn't have tons and tons of power. So I hope that helps answer your question. Stick with me. We're going to rank this sucker on our leaderboard, and then I'll let you go. All right.
Okay, everybody, we are back at Daily Rider headquarters. Time to rank this MT-03 on the DR leaderboard. Another blue pin, 2 Yamahas in a row. Bit of a coincidence there, or conspiracy theory if you want it to be. Please leave your comments below. Anyway, where does the MT-03 fall on the price scale? That's probably pretty clear to see, right? I mean, it's a $4,600 bike that can take you anywhere you want to go and do whatever you want to do. That's very reasonable. Also, it's well priced within its class, as we discussed during the ride. So yeah, I think it falls down pretty low. Is it cooler than a KTM 950 Supermoto? No, come on, get out of here. Of course it's not. If someone told me that they got an MT-03, I'd be like, right on, that's a good choice. But at the same time, you might not be getting a lot of, you know, oohs and ahs from your motorcycling brethren for those bikes. And it's not as cool as an RC390 or a 390 Duke, in my opinion. It's not as cool as a Honda CB300R, I don't think. Doesn't look as good. I think it's gonna be on this side. I think we're gonna drop it right down here. Yamaha MT-03. And time for me to get a new marker, because this one's taking a dump. So now time for where it falls on the actual leaderboard. So it's not as good as a Versys 650 or an Africa Twin, plain and simple. I mean, those ADV bikes are just good, they're practical. Those bikes are a lot more capable. So no way. Is it better than a Ducati Street Fighter V4S? Well, I know what you're thinking, but let's consider it here. It's got a lower seat height, that's good for daily riding. It's got more range, it's still got ABS. So, you know, I think it could be, no, I don't think so. If I was gonna pick one from under the Christmas tree, I would have a Street Fighter for 200 and something very obvious reasons, I think. But also, the Street Fighter is, you know, it's got some quality components, it's got a nice plush seat, it's a nice bike. So I think that's a fair ranking, but I want you to know that that was close. MT-03 is a great daily rider. That's it, here's where it stands. Versus still king, and you got the 35-year-old two-stroke with carburetors, still bringing up the rear. No big surprise there, I hope. So that's it, I can let you go. Thanks for watching, Daily Rider. I hope you learned something, I hope you had fun, and I'll see you next time.
This guy with the flatbed doing the whole Daily Rider route here. I'm gonna be behind him forever. There we go. Left-hand signal, that's nice. So we get a little bit of open road. We can really let this puppy sing.